Okay, so what I wanted to talk quickly about was creating a curve on a piece of wood that is not wide enough to accommodate the curved piece. So this is a cutoff from a rocking chair headrest. This is the curve that I require. Now, if I lay that on here, the wood is too thin, too narrow in thickness to accommodate the curve that I require. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the technique I use to create thicker stock to accommodate this curve. So I take this template of a previously made curve. I've made lines so I can center it on my piece of wood. Just going to draw the curve on. And so normally with this, if I went and cut this out on the bandsaw, I've only got about 1/4 inch of material where I need 1 1/4 inch of material. So I'll show you what I do to thicken the wood. Okay, so I'm over at the bandsaw now. I've set my guide up to accommodate this piece of wood, which is 6 inches, and I'm just going to cut along the line I just drew. We just came for the bandsaw with this 2-inch piece of cherry, which was not wide enough to accommodate the curve I need for the headrest. So we made this cut, and now what we do is we take this piece and we're going to glue it to the back. So now we have enough wood to make this curve. So what we're going to do is we're going to glue this together, and then we'll trace this shape on, and we'll cut it on the bandsaw again. Now, just one little tip. When you have the wood in this position, this is going to be the front of my rocking chair headrest. So what I did is I actually sanded it, because the bandsaw obviously leaves some pretty rough marks. So I took it over there, I sanded it, and then when I glue these together, I will cut the material off the back to get the proper width that I need for this piece. So we're kind of already partway there for the sanding of this, which can be very difficult to get this curve nice and smooth. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to go ahead and glue this together. I'm pretty generous with the glue. You don't want any air pockets in there, so make sure spread the glue around really well. Cover all the spaces. Okay, so the other thing to mention here, just as I was spreading the glue, I was thinking about, before we made the cut on the bandsaw, this board is perfectly S4S. Both surfaces are very flat and straight. So when you glue them together, you've got, when you have the board like this, you know, these were your 2 jointed faces. And so now you're actually gluing 2 jointed faces together. This side's a bit rough, this side's a bit rough, but these 2 faces are jointed. So what we're going to do, I have marks here that allow me to center this. So I got to make sure my corners are lined up with my lines. Okay, so that looks good. So it's really important to keep these 2 pieces flat with one another. So you want this surface to be nice and flat. So I take this guy, presses it down onto my granite surface, which is very flat. Now what I'll do is I'll just start clamping this together. Okay, as you clamp, make sure it doesn't slip in either direction. I like to start from the middle and work my way out. is to push the stress that way, and pushes the glue that way. So I have clamps clamping near the bottom, the middle, and the top. So I tried to get a very good distribution. You can see a lot of clamps. You do not want any air pockets in there. In case you're carving, you don't want to find a glue line in there anywhere. That's good. I went around to make sure all my clamps are nice and tight. Then I removed a little bit of glue just to check my glue line. So if I look in here, the camera focuses. Good glue joint. I don't see any gaps. I went over the whole thing. Looks really nice. Okay, so I took the clamps off, then I jointed one of the faces, and then I took it to my table saw and cut each edge. So now this edge is square to these edges. Why that's important is we're going to cut on the bandsaw the back profile of this, so we want to make sure that our blade is going to go across this straight and not crooked. So a couple of things I've done here. I've marked the line for the glue. So this is where these two pieces came together. So I made a dark line on there. I want to make sure that no matter what I do, I don't take off too much of this front material. If you sand too deep or do any kind of cutting or shaping, you don't want to remove too much material here, because then it'll expose the back piece. Then you'll have front, and then a chunk of back wood in there that you don't really want to see. So I do that. I put a black mark where the glue line is so I don't forget about it. Now I also marked the edges of the headrest that I am going to need to cut the edges on. So those are kind of my end points. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to draw the back profile for the headrest and then cut it on the bandsaw. So what I do is I just sort of extend these lines over a bit to my end marks that I made. So I'll end up cutting these little pieces on the bandsaw. Just a very short piece. Okay, so I'll just extend these out. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I could use this to mark the back, but sometimes I also will just use some kind of a set measure ruler, so then I can just kind of go along here and essentially just trace and copy the curve from the front. So I like to do that. So I'll just come along here. And I don't hold it like this because you have an arc. So then it'll kind of wobble depending on where you have your pen. So I actually hold it on its edge. Okay, so now I have the back line marked. I'm going to go cut that out on the bandsaw. I'm just going to trim off these little pieces in the front. Okay, so we took a 2-inch piece of board that could not accommodate this curve. Cut the front off, glued it to the back, cut it on the bandsaw, and now we have the curve that we want.